Welcome back to the Dockside on Yes TV. My next guest has seen firsthand the power of the North Korean government. Recently, the story of Reverend Hyeon Soo Lim made headlines all across the world when he traveled to North Korea in late January and then vanished. With no communication for months, family, friends, and his congregation at Light Korean Presbyterian Church in Mississauga, Ontario, are very concerned. A regular traveler to the country, Pastor Lim's church has been known for supporting projects in North Korea for almost 20 years. Recently, Pastor Lim resurfaced on North Korean media in July, admitting to allegations against him. That was the first time loved ones learned that he had been detained. And that is all his family and friends know right now as they work to find out more about Pastor Lim's whereabouts. Joining me to talk a little bit more about Pastor Lim and this disturbing story is Lisa Pak, pastor and spokesperson for Light Korean Presbyterian Church. Welcome, Lisa.
Thank you for having me.
So shed some light on North Korea. I know we've seen a little bit in the documentary that we've aired tonight, but what is life like there?
I think we can only speculate as much as anybody can in such a closed country. Yeah. And I do know that even secular media have sent teams there to see what life is like. And we are aware that they show us what they want us to see. Reverend Lim obviously has been there several times. My parents have been there. I do know that there are teams, young people as well, who will teach English in the university there that have been there. And it's very controlled, is what everybody says. And so we're aware that there are parts of society that we as Westerners don't understand. It's a different paradigm altogether. But the things that we are allowed to see, they're very regimented, very disciplined people. And I've always been told that regardless of what the government and what people might say about the government, the people are just real people. They're like you and me. They're happy, they eat food, and they like to enjoy life. It's just in a very different context. And so it's difficult to understand. And I've always heard people say, even the experts on North Korea, we actually don't really know too much about that. So that's the amount that I think I can share with confidence. They're just people over there as well. The government is very different. I think everybody can acknowledge that.
It's the limited amount that we know.
Yes,
of what
it's so
North Korea
close.
is,
They're very good at their security. Yeah.
So tell me about Pastor Lim. First of all, describe who this man is.
Do you know, in the Korean
I see how you light up as you talk about it.
Do you know, in Korean society, there is a hierarchy just by nature of our social structure. And he is a senior pastor, so there is a sense of respect and a little bit of distance, social distance, but he's always loved young people. I grew up in the church, I grew up with his family. He only has one son, so very close to the family. He loves ice fishing, he loves to eat, he is built like a tank. I remember a trip in 2008 when we took to India. I met him there, and he is able to carry his own. And I was in my late 20s then. You used to have trouble keeping up with him. He went to Brazil right before his trip to North Korea, and he's just got this huge heart. Loves to laugh, loves to share life, and loves the Word of God. Always been out to just help anybody in need. So that's the kind of person he is. And so you can kind of understand why he would go to North Korea. And we've had some questions in secular media about that, and they don't understand it. But I mean, this is our people group, and he's been helping out so many different countries and people groups around the world, and you cannot not help your own kinsmen. And so that's where it all began, I think.
Take us back to, it was January when he left to go to North Korea. Tell us why he went.
It was a routine trip. I know that sounds very strange to a lot of people. You don't go vacationing in North Korea, and none of us ever do. It's always with the purpose of helping the people there. If you're Korean, the North Korean issue, you kind of know about it. And I realize that not a lot of people are aware, because when I say I'm Korean, people have asked, are you North or South? And the answer is, well, we're South Korean, because you can't just travel freely if you're North Korean. Having said that, we do want to bring awareness to the people, to the greater world. Just, this is what North Korea is like. This is why people care. It's very dangerous, as some people would term it, but for us, it's people in need. And I've always known Reverend Lim to err on the side of compassion rather than his own personal safety. And it's not that we were reckless. It's not that the projects were reckless. The UN in the mid-90s said, announced with North Korea's permission that they needed aid. And that's when our hearts were like, these are our people. We're helping all sorts of other people. Let's also start sending aid there when the opportunity was there. And so that was a big push. And since then, there has been constant influx of just as much as we can helping in various projects. And so this was a routine trip where he would follow up with the orphanages, especially the school there, and there was a nursing home in the Rajan area where we have been doing these kind of projects for a while now. And so it was just routine. I fully expected to see him because we were talking about things that we need to do for this year. And it was quite, we were taken aback by the fact that what went wrong this time. So
because he's been there numerous times.
Yeah, and he knows how to behave.
Yeah.
We are a Christian, but we do also respect the country's regulations. So we're not going to Bible thump them or just go proselytizing when they've asked us not to, because we also believe that in our actions and just the way that we treat people, that is also a type of, reaching out to people and with the love of Christ. So we know, and he especially knows how to behave in a way that is effective and not counterproductive to the work that we're doing there.
Right. So when did you realize that something was off?
We were aware, especially towards the end of 2014 when the Ebola virus was such a huge international crisis, and we had heard that North Korea was very sensitive to that issue, and they had put up quarantine. So when we heard in early February that he did not come out to the meeting spot to meet with our other deacon there, a little bit alarmed. It's unusual, but again, we wanted to give the whole situation the benefit of doubt with the Ebola quarantine. And so up until the 21 days, each day goes by, you're a little bit more wary, and we're hoping that after the quarantine time, he would be released. And when that didn't happen, it was like, okay, we have to take this a little bit more seriously. We did want to give the whole situation the time that was necessary because we didn't want to assume, and we didn't want to accuse anybody of anything. And so we were like, okay, that's a reasonable, considering the circumstances, that sounds reasonable. We've heard that other business people who are going in and out of the country had to endure the same kind of quarantine. So we're like, okay. But as soon as those days were up, it was just kind of like, okay, we have to approach this differently now.
Something
is wrong. It's not the usual thing anymore.
When was the last time you heard from him?
January 27th, because that was the day that he was leaving. He preached on Sunday, January 25th, and then thereafter we had not heard from him.
And he was someone who would keep in contact with you?
As much as he possibly could.
Family?
In North Korea, you go dark, you cannot use your media, and you can't contact people outside unless it's through their channels. But that has rarely happened, and we weren't worried. So as soon as he would get out where he can contact us, he would let us know how it went and say, oh, we're coming back, this is what I need done for Sunday or whatnot. Give us an update of what had happened if it was necessary, but we'd always hear from him, and he'd always write pastor's column for the bulletin in our Sunday bulletins. So he would always contact us when he got out, but it's rare that people are able to contact if you're in there.
So when did you realize that he had been detained by the government?
The government the DPRK government had let the Canadian government know. I think it was sometime during March. I remember the press release that we sent out sometime during March. That was the official notice that he was detained. But we hadn't heard anything. None of the charges until the recent press conference where we saw his face and heard his voice. But there was no contact until then, and still no actual contact. That was just very one-sided. We saw him, we heard him, but we haven't been able to communicate with him.
And has the Canadian government been helping at all?
Canadian government has been stellar. We always complain about government here and there, but when we were able to meet with some of those government officials, you walk away from a conversation with them knowing that they're women and men of integrity, principle, and character and ability. And so truly just praying for that God would use all the wisdom and all their know-how in a way that would bring him glory in this situation is something that we're asking the people to pray for. They have been extremely supportive, and we recognize that they can't tell everything to us because of the sensitivity of the issue. But again, it's the conversation you have with people, and you know that they're people of integrity, so you trust their decisions that they make. So that was actually hugely important for us to know that this situation is in very capable hands. And again, just continuing to cover the Canadian government and their officials with prayer because they have been very supportive, and we leave every conversation confident that they're doing everything that they need to be doing.
What was your response and the church's response and Pastor Lim's family's response when they saw the television coverage of him? Because that would have been the first time they'd seen him in months.
I think everyone was taken aback a little bit. Shocked.
Were you prepared? Did you know this was coming out?
The Canadian government let us know a little bit beforehand, but again, they're very much in the dark if the North Korean government does not share anything. So we were kind of bracing ourselves, but we didn't know how it would come out, when exactly it would come out, and so we were just kind of waiting. But you think you can prepare yourself for something like that, but when you haven't seen someone for months and it's this kind of context, there was relief that he was alive. I think there was a little bit of disillusionment because it came off as a confession at first, and you just understand that context. You don't really hear the words at the first time you see something like this. There was just confusion, I think. And there was hope. There must be something moving. Maybe a few days later, he will be released, or we'll hear something. So it was a whole bunch of emotions from everybody, the congregation and the family as well. And for the family, everything a little bit more intensified. This is really personal for them. So
what are the next steps? What happens from here? You've seen this. You've seen Pastor Lim on television, and then what happens? Do you get communication?
Yeah, well, we were hoping.
Yeah.
And this is really, it's in the North Korean government's court, so to speak, because we are asking for, we just want him home in a speedy positive resolution to all this. We want them to know that we love the people. Everything that our church has done, everything that Reverend Lim has done has not meant to undermine the government, but really just to bless the people. And we're waiting for their response because they have this process that we're probably not aware fully of how they do things. So they've obviously asked him to tape this and confess. And now we're waiting to see how their process goes. Because again, we don't want to cut in. We don't want to demand. We just want them to know that we are still here. We're waiting for his release. We want him back. We want him back home. And we're trying to really respect the process that they have there, even though we don't understand it completely. But that's okay. I mean, this is what we understand about doing ministry in countries that are very different from the way we run things here. So.
And how can people at home watching this help? Is there anything that we can do to help in this circumstance?
I am personally, and our congregation, we believe in prayer. I believe that God is sovereign. I believe that he is the author of history. We like things to run on our own timing, but I believe God's timing is bang on. And I believe that he allows certain things to show us, to teach us things personally, as a family, as a congregation, but also ultimately for his glory. So one of the principles that we've always tried to keep as a faith community is the decisions we make as a family, as a congregation, not out of fear or desperation, but truly for the glory of God. If that means that we wait, then we wait in prayer. And that would be one huge thing. Praying for the Canadian government, praying for the family, our church leadership, because you can imagine some days are strain, but for wisdom, and ultimately that we make decisions, not only in this situation, but in every situation for the glory of God, and that God would sustain us daily once those decisions are made.
How's your church handling not having their senior pastor there right now?
Our current interim senior pastor, Reverend Jason No, is doing an excellent job, considering all the circumstances, just really just gathering the leadership together in prayer. We do ask the people to pray for our elders, for Reverend Jason No, also for the young people, because they're all aware, and it's this community that has come together. There are days where it's harder, especially when you hear something like the press conference or when questions are being asked, but we hope that we can carry ourselves with integrity before God, and in keeping with the vision that Reverend Lim had for this community when he took over as senior pastor and when he led us for so many decades.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for
Thank you
joining
so much
me tonight.
Yes,
and we will definitely keep your community in prayer, and also the people of North Korea.
Absolutely.
In prayer.
That is so important. I know that's very dear to Reverend Lim's heart. That's what he would ask for if you were here.
Thank you again.
Thank you so much.